How destructive are they?
They're very destructive. If I looked at it on average, I could lose up to 10% of my grain crops in a growing season.
Guess what local farmers in Texas witnessed when they woke up one morning? Overnight, wild boars completely wrecked their farms. Everything they had constructed was ruined, and irrigation lines were bent like toys. How can such an attack be permanently prevented? The true question is that. It's unbelievable how cleverly these farmers in Texas were able to stop the entire onslaught. You'll want to watch this, so stay with us. The ancient enemy returns. There isn't a monster or a riddle at the beginning of the American wild boar tragedy. It all begins with a tiny mistake. The Spanish explorer brought some farm pigs with him. In 1539, Hernando de Soto reached the Florida shore. They were designed to make it simple for him to transport food while traveling. After a few people fled into the woods, nobody considered what would happen. After leaving the barn, those adorable piglets lost their cuteness. They were able to quickly adapt, survive storms, find food with ease, and produce a large number of offspring in the wild. The first wild pig populations in North America emerged as a result of that escape. Then, there was an issue with the land that worsened faster than anyone had anticipated. For a very long period, these earliest wild pigs lived in small groups. They lived close to forests and marshes. Most of the time, nobody would notice, but occasionally they would breach into fields. If the story ended there, America would not be engaged in the current invasion. However, in the early 1990s, large Eurasian wild boars from Asia and Europe were imported by wealthy landowners and hunting organizations. These farm animals weren't pleasant. They were enormous, resilient, swift, cruel, and perfectly constructed for life. They could eat through roots like a shovel, dash through muck, and plow through prickly vegetation. They were everything that farmers feared and hunters desired. These European wild boars mingled with the local wild pigs when they escaped or were intentionally released for hunting. This combination produced a new, far more powerful animal, more than either parent. It was a superspecies that could survive in nearly any environment and was extremely strong and intelligent. This hybrid animal could hide in dense undergrowth, swim in rivers, climb steep hills, and consume nearly everything. It was thriving rather than merely surviving. The states were unable to determine what had occurred since it was too late. Many more folks were present. There were over 2.4 million wild boars in 18 U.S. states in 1982. The nation attempted to overlook it, despite the fact that it was a serious issue. Everyone regretted their decision. When there were 7 million hogs, that number had nearly tripled by 2016. 35 states are home to them. Scientists were astounded by how quickly these animals were proliferating. They weren't traveling slowly. This growth was abnormal. It was an assault. Texas developed into a fantastic habitat for wild boars. The animals already had all they required. East Texas has soft soil that was ideal for roots and dense pine forests. They could conceal themselves in Central Texas's undulating terrain and dense undergrowth. Due to the dense, prickly bush in South Texas, they were protected from both humans and animals. At night, they could pillage farmland on the Panhandle's vast plains. No matter where they traveled, the land provided them with food, drink, and a place to live. In a strange way, Texas resembled an exclusive motel for wild pigs. Animals now have even easier lives because of farming and ranching. Pigs exploited the water tanks that ranchers constructed for their cattle throughout the year. Farmers grew soybeans, corn, wheat, and peanuts. Pigs in the wild adore these items. Hogs also took over the water lines that wildlife managers had improved for deer. The Texans didn't mean to create the ideal habitat for wild boars, but everything turned out well for them. Additionally, there were no native predators in Texas that were powerful or widespread enough to control the hog population. Coyotes consumed piglets, but they were hesitant to approach adults. Bobcats and other cats had little chance. there weren't enough black bears. They were avoided by mountain lions until absolutely necessary. Because these hogs were so tough, even creatures that were supposed to consume them avoided touching them. The boars had no enemies, so they behaved as they pleased. Their ability to procreate so rapidly was their greatest hazardous asset. A female hog can achieve full size in just 6 months. Their youngsters are just around 4 months old. They can produce 2 litters of 10 to 12 babies each year when there is an abundance of food. Even worse, those pigs can give birth to babies in 6 to 12 months due to their rapid growth. This method of reproduction is not typical. This machine is composed of live organisms. It creates an exponential trajectory that appears unstoppable. If a farmer removed 100 boars from a property, the remaining adults could replenish them all in 18 months. Killing a few here and there doesn't work because of this. This animal transforms into a new one more quickly than most farmers can react, and more quickly than most hunters can capture it. Ultimately, Texas had the worst wild boar problem in the United States. A straightforward error committed hundreds of years ago. Combined with people's innate curiosity, hunting customs, and ideal weather, created an unavoidable nightmare. It started with a few pigs and has since spread throughout the entire state, costing millions of dollars, destroying farms, contaminating water, and endangering animals. Every year, the number continues to rise. Every season, fresh sounders relocate to new counties. Every night, farms sustain greater harm. The assault is still ongoing. It accelerates. And everything that transpired will make perfect sense when you see what these farmers devised to stop thousands of wild boars at once. This is due to the fact that the next section demonstrates how Texas transformed chaos into order. The billion-dollar war, if the problem began with the increase in wild boars. Then Texas views them as a true enemy because of the harm they do. The damage is significant and cannot be easily disregarded by farms. Every day, a billion-dollar conflict rages in woods, rivers, pastures, and farms. And such figures are absurd. In Texas alone, wild boars generate around $188 million in damage annually. And as the population increases, this figure continues to rise. There will be no return of that danger. The event is currently taking place. The speed at which one animal may devastate land is astounding. A feral pig has the ability to destroy anything valued at $1,000 in a single night. That is the cost of repairing fences, replacing irrigation lines, fixing rooted dirt, and replanting crops. That is only one hog. The true danger is not the lone hog, but the sounders. These family groups may consist of 20 or more animals that run around like a wrecking crew. Every minute, a single pig may devastate 6.5 square feet of ground. A sounder can level acres of land before daybreak if they band together. These creatures are so powerful that they can destroy fields like leg-mounted bulldozers. Typically, people imagine that crops are killed by wild creatures consuming them, but this invasion operates differently. Walking on, tearing, and pulling everything apart without even touching the plants is what causes 95% of the damage. A bunch of wild hogs cannot move slowly across a farm. The field appears to have been hit by a tornado, as seen by the broken stalks, broken irrigation pipes, ripped dirt, and smashed fences. Farmers lose entire seasons of labor in a single night, not just crops. Cornfields and hayfields are particularly vulnerable. The tall plants are immediately trampled when the hogs push through. Irrigation systems that cost thousands of dollars can become irreparably damaged. The soil that has accumulated over many years becomes loose and fragmented. Additionally, damage that has already been done cannot be undone. Replanting does not change the structure of the soil. The degradation continues even after the lines are changed. Standing in these destroyed fields, farmers are aware that they have lost money, time, a security as a result of an attack that they were unable to prevent or anticipate. However, harm has been done to more than just farmland. Unlike many invasive species, wild boars have the ability to completely alter their surroundings. They go deeply into the ground to look for insects, roots, and whatever else they can consume while rooting. But digging is more than just creating holes. Different soil layers that shouldn't mix are combined. This allows exotic plants to take over by killing native plants that require specific soil conditions to thrive. Locations that have remained stable for hundreds of years can shift in a single season. Erosion is another silent danger. When hogs plow through creek banks or rip through soft ground, the ground begins to crumble. The loose soil is carried away by rainfall. As a result, the earth loses nutrients and deeper channels are created. The land's shape shifts. Dirt is lost from hills. Sand accumulates in valleys. Additionally, trees with once strong roots begin to weaken. This harm is not limited to the land at the moment. It is detrimental to future generations. Water lines sustain some of the worst damage. When wild boars root in marshy places or wallow in shallow water, they churn up muck, which is helpful for plants as well as harmful germs. Fish lose oxygen, streams become hazy, and the water quality rapidly deteriorates. Animals become ill when they consume tainted water. Aquatic species are becoming extinct. Even the scent of the water is altered if trash and other materials end up in it. Once clear and flowing, the water is now murky and unclean. Water and plants are not the only things being harmed. Wild boars can be extremely dangerous hunters when they feel like it. They break into the nests of birds, including prairie chickens, wild turkeys, and doves that lay their eggs on the ground. These birds are already struggling to survive due to territory loss. And the hogs increase the likelihood that they will go extinct. When deer fawns hide in dense grass in the spring, hogs may easily locate them. Additionally, they consume the eggs of endangered animals and frogs and reptiles. It's a cascading reaction that destroys entire food webs, not simply hunting. Most individuals don't understand that. Land damage is not the only thing that wild boars do. They alter the laws of nature wherever they go. They alter the earth, the water, and the habitats of other species in order to survive. For an invading animal, that is a significant amount of power. Instead of acting like visitors, they behave as though they are the land's owners. They have left their mark even in areas that don't appear to have been touched. In hollow trees, birds have broken into nests. The fields appear to be in good condition until someone enters a secret rooted patch. The woodland floors are marked by heavy bodies moving through the bush. Rivers become gloomy after every storm because the ground is so wet. Everywhere you look, these creatures have left their mark. For this reason, they refer to it as a war. They are up against an adversary that destroys land on all fronts economically, ecologically, and environmentally. Then this isn't just to make the story sound thrilling. Every acre of damage caused by hogs requires time and money to repair, and some damage is irreversible. For this reason, Texas farmers began searching for a solution to prevent rather than merely slow down the damage. Why did all of the previous approaches fail so miserably? The startling truths behind the errors that worsened the invasion will be revealed to you in the following section of this adventure. Why conventional approaches failed by the time Texas realized how dangerous wild boars actually were. It was obvious that extensive hunting would eradicate them. It makes sense that if the state permitted constant hunting, the number of animals would decline. But everyone was surprised by what happened next. Instead of declining, the population of wild boars increased even more quickly. Texas just didn't try. They didn't fail. The reason for this was that the hogs benefited more from everything Texas allowed to occur. There weren't many rules in Texas. No hunting season was halted. There was no deadline for the year that hunting wild hogs was prohibited. On private property, hunters were not even required to have a license. They were permitted to use rifles, shotguns, bows, crossbows, handguns, and even swords. During the day and at night, hunters with dogs, blinds, feeders, and even low-flying airplanes flew over the fields. There were some of the most open shooting spots in the entire nation. The majority of people believed that because hogs had so many liberties, their population would decline. But it didn't. Rather, the numbers skyrocketed. Many hunters were perplexed, and landlords were upset about the lack of development. However, it didn't fail due to fate or good fortune. It was a direct outcome of human behavior. The first major error was simple to make, but extremely detrimental. The wrong animals were targeted by the shooters. The majority of people were searching for large, robust males with long tusks. These were the awards. When hunters felt proud, they talked about this. However, huge men were not the cause of the population expansion. The young pigs and girls were. The ladies give birth to large litters twice a year. Piglets have rapid growth and early childbearing. However, because they were not particularly thrilling to shoot, hunters rarely bothered with them. Because he can reproduce with many ladies, eliminating a huge guy has no impact on population increase. Simultaneously, leaving the females alive allowed reproduction to proceed at full pace. Hunting ultimately didn't significantly slow down the blast. Only those animals that weren't essential to the survival of the species were eliminated. In other words, from the beginning, the hunters were pursuing the wrong animal. In 1999, Tennessee started permitting widespread wild hog hunting. At the time, hogs were found in just 6 counties. However, instead of maintaining order, an odd thing occurred. 12 years after their initial sighting, in 2011, wild boars have spread to 70 counties. That growth wasn't typical. It was fully charged. The same thing occurred in California. Only a few coastal communities were home to wild pigs in 1956. However, by 1999, they had spread to 56 of the state's 58 counties.